822, it's Newstalk 1280 and 101.3 KIT. Good morning, Yakima. Brian Stevenson along with Rob Vickers, Lance Tormey, Jack is here, and we have a special in-studio guest.
That's correct. We have gubernatorial candidate Sammy Bird, who is going to be speaking at the Sela Civic Center tonight at 6:30. And it's a free event for everyone, and we thought this would be a perfect opportunity while he's here in town to just share a little bit about his experience on the campaign thus far. So how's it going out there?
It's going remarkable. We're so blessed. The folks are really rallying behind us. Right now, as we speak, we are bringing in more small dollar donations than any other campaign running against Jay Inslee combined. That includes the Democrats. And so what that's telling us is our grassroots movement, getting out on the road, going from small town to small town to small town, is really effective because people get a voice and they get to see their future governor.
What are they telling you? What's the theme that you're picking up throughout the state?
Oh, my friend, if you just watch the news, if you pay attention what's happening in our schools, what's happening in our streets, what we're seeing, it's a combination of what is happening to parents' rights? Will they come after my child next?
Right.
Why are they saying this and doing this when it makes no sense? How are they spending $800 million on homelessness, but you continue to see it increase and tent cities pop up all over the nation and even in rural Washington state? Just the other day, I was in Ponderay County, all the way up to Medellin on the Canadian border, on the right side of the Idaho border, crossed over to Stevens County, hitting all these small communities. Right before that, I was in Bremerton, I was in Snohomish County. So there's a consistent pattern of concern that things are changing so fast and so out of control, people are getting really worried.
So are you finding Are you finding over on the west side that they're as responsive as they are here on the east side, where we tend to be a little more conservative?
Yeah, the
anyway?
same opinions about all those things?
So I will say absolutely, and people listening may go, well, you haven't talked to me. But what I would say is this. There are certain things that goes across party lines. When you talk about quality in education, every parent has an unconditional positive regard for their children, and those grandparents as well. Sure. So when you talk about failing schools, that is something that everybody they're vested in. It's their babies, it's their children. People will be surprised when you start talking about Second Amendment rights. That's not just for Republicans or conservatives. This is an American concern because it's our Second Amendment, Article 1, Section 24 of the Washington State Constitution. And when you're in Seattle and you see homelessness out of control, graffiti in the tunnels on our signs,
oh my gosh,
Seattle city streets, everyone has seen that, and I've got relatives, guys, this is going to surprise you, being a man of color, yes, I've got relatives that are Democrat, and they are supporting our campaign because they know what they're seeing, and they know that what they're seeing is not right. They know me, and they know that we need leadership in Washington State, not to divide us, but to unite us and focus on solutions with action.
Absolutely. Let me ask you really quickly here, because you talk about American values, really, and that coincides with, I think, traditional family values. You are described as a constitutional Christian conservative. So far, so good. But you didn't have a real easy time in your early years growing up in a ghetto area of East Oakland, and that's a rough part of the country right there. But you went on to become a Marine. You served in the Marine Corps, then the U.S. Army. Fascinating background. Just tell us a little bit about you and who Sammy Bird is.
You know, people ask often why I'm running, but if you understand my story and you see what's happening in our society, within our state, it's almost like the perfect fit. And I say that with humility. You know, starting out pre-civil rights in the 60s, right, in the ghetto of East Oakland, California, those were rough times. A single mother with 7 children.
Wow.
Right, 7 children. And so I like to tell people who will listen, you know, my entire life has been shaped by the strength, love, and support of strong women. You know, my mother, my wife, I have 3 daughters, so God determined I would be surrounded by women my entire life, and that is a blessing.
That ain't bad.
Right? No, not at all. But again, having gone through adversity, you know, we are so divided right now along these lines of racial divide, and I grew up and I lived through it. I mean, I've had the experiences of racism, and we progressed through it. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., He and my mother were my childhood idols. Right, 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That march on Washington, August 28th. Right, that beautiful speech, "I Have a Dream," and here I am playing in the streets of the inner city ghetto, and Martin Luther King Jr. is marching for me to have civil rights. The fact that my mother moved us to Seattle, where I was raised, where I dropped out of high school to join the Marine Corps because I struggled academically from K through 11, right, and then here I am. I received my bachelor's degree, summa cum laude, 4.0, my graduate degree from Villanova University. I'm about to wrap up my PhD in industrial organizational psychology. But what that I'm saying with that, overcoming adversity, navigating barriers of life, this is a can-do attitude. So I like to tell people who would listen, my mother raised me to be an American and not an Americant. And so
Amen.
I hope people in Seattle see my life story and say, if he can do it, we can do it, because I speak for everyone, and especially those folks who have been forgotten, those folks living below the poverty line. I'm that food stamp kid, and we didn't have a sexy credit card, right? We have the funny money right there in line, turning red, my case burgundy, right? And so people are going, oh, there's the food stamp family, there's the poor family. Having that understanding, I think, positions me from not only a position of compassion, but empathy and understanding.
Do you get some pushback or even some criticism from certain folks on the left who see you and maybe thought of as an unlikely person to be running for governor as a Republican with your kind of background? Do you ever get any of that?
Oh, my friend, I
Yeah.
sure have.
And I asked that almost facetiously because I'm sure you do.
Maybe from family members, huh?
Oh, here's the neat thing. So my family, we were just at, bless my sister, she passed. We were at her wake, a celebration of her life. And again, I'm sitting with my family. We love each other. But again, we have different viewpoints often. And most of my family are all Democrats. And I love them unconditionally with all my heart. And they're intelligent, they're brilliant. And what they're saying is, Sammy, what you're saying makes sense. So what's happening right now in our society, we're not having conversations. We are so busy dividing
Bingo.
about the things we don't agree with. But in fact, 93% of the things we actually agree with, we're not talking about. Again, our schools, safe streets, quality in education, all the above. So to your point, yes. And someone said just a few weeks ago, how can you be a black man and be a Republican? And I quickly responded, I mean, if you understand our nation's history, I could ask, how can you be a black man and not be a Republican? Because we were the party in 1854 of abolition, the party that ended slavery, the party that supported Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to push civil rights across the line.
The party that supported civil rights.
Exactly. And
That's
what we've done is we have shirked our responsibilities to uphold who we are, who we were, who we always have been, by not communicating what we are about. And that's why I tell people, why am I a Republican? I am that party of Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, and I'm going to throw Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in there.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. He didn't claim, but we marched for the same thing.
I'm glad you bring that up, because I got to believe that if Martin Luther King Jr. were here today, he'd say, this is not what I meant. When I was telling you that I wanted us all to be one big family, that we all want to be able to be seen for the content of our character, not the color of our skin, that when you took this diversity movement, all you did is you essentially divided us deeper than we've ever been divided before.
Yeah, Dr. King said, August 20th, I have a dream. That my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Amen. And I will tell you, with my life, I have been judged by the content of my character and held accountable. Right now, this is 2023. We've had a black president. We've had black leadership. Yes, I will say we could always use more mentorship, more representation, but we are moving in that direction. And what you just said, Martin Luther King Jr. worked together. He realized that we can only be successful as a nation if we come together and we unite around one effort to bring that love, that equality, that compassion, that empathy, as citizens united to preserve the rights, and he called it the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, magnificent documents which in fact are promissory notes to the American people.
It's part of our American exceptionalism, to be quite honest. And American exceptionalism in my opinion, doesn't derive from the state. It derives from the individual.
Absolutely.
And the individual rights to own property, be secure in their person, to speak freely when they believe something so passionately.
No, absolutely. Our strength as a nation, as an American nation, our strength is in fact our diversity. If you think back to our history and you look at that plaque on the Statue of Liberty, it's called The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus. Send me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse on your teeming shores. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me, and I will raise my lamp beside the golden door. That said it right there. We were never the nation of elitists, the nation of racial supremacy. I reject all racial supremacy and prejudice against our brothers and sisters.
Absolutely.
And say, once again, understand what America is.
Yeah.
We were bound to unite, to grow forward together in love and unity, to create prosperity for us all. That's liberty. That's opportunity. That's America.
Yeah, this
Amen.
is so refreshing. Hey, we got some big issues. So just quick answers. Gun rights. How do you feel about gun rights? There's a ban on semi-automatic rifles that it's going to look like it's going to be a law in our state. Gun rights.
My first deployment was as a sniper and as a sniper team leader. I understand weaponry. I understand that weapons don't kill people, guns don't kill people, people kill people. The American Psychological Association has conducted a study, and it says the root cause of gun violence, it's not guns, it's the individual, starting back with social economic strife, rolling into mental illness, right? And so when we understand that, and then we understand our founding fathers and their intent, it's number 2 for a reason. So Jefferson, right, and Madison, they came together and said, this is something that is so important, we must understand it. And in Washington State, it's Article 1, Section 24 of the Washington State Constitution, which gives us, as Washingtonians, more rights to own weapons, to protect and to defend our property and our loved ones. Why are we messing with that instead of bringing real solutions to address the root cause of the issue? Mental illness, right? And accountability within our citizenry, where we have no laws anymore. It seems like there's no enforcement. Our prosecutors are off the rails. And so this goes to the conditioning theory, right? There's no negative reinforcement of our laws. We need to change that.
Abortion.
Oh, gosh. Lean into it. Right? This is one of those situations where I am a pro-life candidate, but I am pro-women's rights all day long. Remember, that single mom, that beautiful wife of mine and my 3 babies, I support women's rights. I support women's health. But why are we digging into these trenches and shooting at one another when we should start talking about bringing those resources into those communities so that those women have an understanding that they are supported? Let's give them options. Most of the abortions that happen in Washington State, and by the way, we have a law, 9.02.110. It says life of the mother, viability of the fetus. But why are we not going into those townships, those cities, and educating young men to take ownership, young women to understand their self-worth, and to bring resources in support of women? We can do much better. Let's get around the concept of the root cause and stopping this difficult decision from happening. We don't insult people because they're put in a very terrible situation. We support them, we give them options, and we stop it from happening as best we can. As a governor, it is not my job to impose my will on the American or the Washington citizens. It's my job to listen to them. So my call to action is, if you want substantive change, we have a constitutional procedure. Get involved, get engaged. Let's do something about it.
Let's say, though, you became governor of Washington State, and maybe you even have a Republican legislature, and they send up a bill to you that says, hey, no abortions past the 2nd trimester, period. What do you do with that?
Yeah, well, again, if they're sitting in legislature, we're a constitutional republic. They're in support of the citizens of Washington. The same citizens that brought that law and voted for that law, this would be the same thing on the other side. If citizens got together and they voted that they wanted, again, as you pointed out, we are not supporting abortions all the way up to, right, a baby's delivery. No, we're saying no to that. Well, then that's the will of the people, and it's my job. Again, Article 1, Section 1. Government derives their just powers from the governed. It is my job to act, and I would support that.
Transgender rights.
I'm very clear. I do not discriminate against anyone. And then if you're LGBTQAI plus, you're my brother, you're my sister. But what I'm saying very clearly, leave our children alone. Stay away from our children, stay out of school. But on that same note, if a child presents as being gay or homosexual, I will love them. They are welcome into my house. We'll break bread together. We'll have fellowship. I love everyone. All I'm saying is we've gone to a part where we have drag queen shows, and it's wrapped in a wrapper of Disney, and invite your children. Now, a parent has their unalienable right to do and to lead and to guide their children. And I support that regardless on which side you're on. But when you're bringing that and establishing it as a societal norm and you're influencing
In the
children
schools.
in the schools,
Right.
that is not their job. It is not their role. Let children be children. Let parents be parent. And let's get back to actually educating our children. Real quick. When it comes to English and language arts, only 50.7% of all students, when you average out all school districts, met grade level standards in English and language arts. Math, it's 35.7, and science, it's 42.7. We are failing our children academically and statistically, but we're graduating them at a rate of 83%. But we have time to talk about a child's life outcome is determined by the color of their skin, or if they're a white child, they are somehow riddled with guilt because they are tied to slavery and they have this white fragility. I'm tired of the false labels. I'm tired of the division. And as we said at the outset, let's get back to Martin Luther King Jr.'s philosophy of uniting in love and support of one another, growing forward to a more prosperous America, and in this case, a more prosperous Washington state. Washington first.
By the way, it's 8:38, and we cruise through the Fox News break at the bottom. We're having too good of a discussion here with Sammy Bird, who is a gubernatorial candidate for the state of Washington and out of the Tri-Cities.
Yes.
And, you know, back to the, you were talking about, maybe you use the example of a drag queen show in grade school, that kind of thing. It seems the live and let live attitude hasn't worked. There's an effort to indoctrinate, and there's an effort to say, I shouldn't only be allowed to feel XYZ, you should be forced to endorse XYZ. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where a lot of parents have issues. But sticking with education, and I'm sure this is a topic you can speak to. What about CRT in school?
Well, yes and no. So right, and again, we're already saying we reject all racial supremacy. So that is a no-go. Mm-hmm. It is a no-go. And I want to bring context. You already know my background. You know my life story. But I want to relate it to cancer. You know, I just went through prostate cancer, right?
Oh, wow.
Oh, high level, right? I was an 8 out of 10 on that scale, and we went through it. Radiation, we handled it, right? That was God's will. I got a mission to do. I got work to do in Washington State, right? So here I am. But it's when I went through my treatment, I chose radiation, right? And instead of just surgery and removing, and so that radiation was focused on a specific threat concern where the cancer is. Mm-hmm. Racism is a cancer. It's ignorance, and it must be cut out. You don't label an entire school system, all those teachers, all those administrators, and those children, for goodness sake, you don't label them as racist, and you don't teach children to be helpless. You build resiliency into those children. But when we have a case of racial prejudice and discrimination, you address it specifically, surgically, and you make sure it doesn't happen, which is why in our school district, we brought forward a policy and got it passed to say we will not teach that nonsense to our children. We have no hesitation to teach truth in our history, to teach civics to our children.
What an idea.
Right? With a concept to
right.
actually understand what a constitutional republic is. But to teach objectively, right? Empirically, fact-based. Don't influence a child to be helpless. Influence a child to understand their self-worth and understand that their future is not determined by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character and the level of their effort.
This makes a lot of sense what you're saying, because while many of the proponents of CRT are very laser focused on a particular agenda, the opposite side of that, the kind of whitewashing or ignoring facts about our history and about, civil rights was passed in the 60s. Everyone should just snap out of it. It's not that easy.
No.
There's generational effect that's there that people
Oh, you
don't
bet.
spend enough time understanding. And you can't, it isn't as, I think we want a quick fix these days. And that doesn't work.
No.
So it all I suppose it has to do with what your end goal is. If your end goal is to love one another and for the best outcome for everyone, then I guess listening to other people is what's a necessary ingredient.
Yeah. Hey, I've got two areas that I think, one, while you're here, it's just, and by the way, thank you for taking the time.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
great having you here, and I love your forthright going right at the issue. California, looks like they're very close to accepting several recommendations to actually consider reparations to Black Americans that have ties either to slavery through their heritage or lineage, or maybe they weren't given loans during the 70s, or they were moved out of areas because of urban development. And all those things are terrible blots on our history. I don't deny any of that. But where do you stand? Because I think Washington's never that far behind California in adopting some of these thoughts, ideas, policies. So where do you stand on the whole reparations issue?
It's offensive. At my core, it offends me. When you talk about black and brown people as somehow being weak, that we need states and governments to support us like we're some kind of puppy. No, we are just as effective as any other American citizen. And the fact that we are regressing. So when you talk about these progressives and their so-called progressive initiatives, they are regressive and their initiatives are regressive. They're taking us back to slavery and to Jim Crow. By the way, not a Republican idea.
No,
okay?
absolutely not.
And to the KKK, not a Republican idea. So they're taking us back to live in the most darkest times of our history, shirking and ignoring Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He gave his life for the soul of America, and now these regressive groups are taking us back to dwell and saying that we somehow need compensation. I'll give you compensation. Reform the welfare system that gives a handout, not a hand up, but a consistent handout, just enough to keep marginalized groups poor
Marginal.
for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
How about lifting them up with training, with a certification, with job placement?
Amen.
Give them a piece of that American dream. Let's teach them how to fish right out of Scripture. And this is what we need. Let's not hold us back. I got to say, Betsy Coleman, this is a name most people won't know. She was the first ever black woman pilot in the history of the United States of America. She didn't say no. She went to France, where racism in America would not allow her to learn how to fly a plane. She went to France and she learned how to fly, and that girl flew high. She was a mentor. She set the standard for all to follow. Rosa Parks, there's so many people. Harriet Tubman. I can go back to Frederick Douglass and say, no, we are a capable people. Black and brown, it does not matter. We're Americans and we live in America, and America is for everyone. God bless us all.
Absolutely, really, really great. And I think what is systemic is on the part of, it seems, the Democrat Party, who wants to keep folks with that mindset like, man, this is hopeless. This is hopeless, and it's their fault or her fault or whatever it might be.
You know what it
Instead
is?
of saying, hey, let's all benefit here.
Let's do it together.
Let's do it together.
It's a progressive plantation.
Yep.
It's a modern day plantation.
Yeah.
It's modern day racist when you subjugate and you teach a whole group of people to hate one another. Their life's outcome is determined by race, and that racism and prejudice is everywhere you turn. In your own country is racist. You know, I'm not the only one who fought for and bled for his nation. Right, as an Army Special Forces Green Beret in combat, I was the first of my demographic to become a Special Forces Green Beret at age 43. So I'm one of those people, understanding my beginning, who pushed through adversity or barriers because I was not helpless, and I never learned to be helpless from that single black woman pre-civil rights. She taught me to be resilient. That's what we should be focusing on. lifting one another up.
You mentioned earlier that we're a constitutional republic, and we are at a federal level, but in Washington State, mob rules because it's a democracy here, and you've got to break through the cascade curtain, my friend.
Oh.
And how would you feel about supporting an electoral college at the state level, where all of the 39 counties are actually represented by electoral votes?
Yeah, so naturally that sounds like the right answer. Because if you want to talk about that word equity, does that not give equity to Eastern Washington?
Right.
Right? So you want to push that word equity, let's push the word equity. I will always default, because we're talking about being a constitutional republic. This goes back to the will of the people. And the difference between my administration as governor is, again, it's not to choke or suppress the will of the people, but to do my job, listen to and advocate for the will of the people.
But you do set the agenda as the governor.
We sure do. And I really do want equal representation across the state. I don't want people in Eastern Washington to think we have to draw a line at the Cascades and we need to default into Idaho and become our own individual state.
That's how we feel.
Right? There's a lot of people who feel that way, which
Right.
means their voices aren't being heard. Sound familiar? We're being
Yes.
marginalized. Sound familiar?
Disenfranchised.
We're being disenfranchised. And
Hence
so-
this current legislative section we're not being listened to.
Oh my Lord, have mercy! Don't get me started. When we start off with 1,600, right? We started out with 1,600 bills. They have all this time to do all these bills that divide us as a state and marginalize what I would call the minority of the citizens. But they are pushing a regressive agenda to divide us.
Yes.
But they're not doing much in terms of bringing real solutions to the homelessness, to the lawlessness, to our failing school system. We need to get our priorities right, and we need to understand who we work for, the people of Washington State.
It's 8:48. We're chatting with Sammy Bird, who is a gubernatorial candidate in the state of Washington, a Republican, and, a Special Forces Green Beret, Marine, United States Army. The list is on and on. And I definitely would encourage anyone to want to find out more information. Go birdforgovernor.com. That's BIRD, birdforgovernor.com. He is going to be speaking later today in Selah.
Yes.
This evening.
At
You
the
wanna
Civic
tell us a little
Convention
bit?
Center, right?
Okay.
Yeah, no, I hope to see people there. And if you're listening, I ask you, I implore you, let's invest in Washington State right now. Join our campaign, join our movement, donate at birdforgovernor.com. Birdforgovernor.com.
Okay. Josh just sent in on our app message. He says, how do you plan to beat the rigged mail-in ballot system?
Well, you know what? So election integrity it's an American concern. It's a citizen's concern. And within our campaign team, we have an election integrity initiative by which we have legal ballot harvesting in Washington State, which means we need to go to the citizens of Washington State. And let me just give you, here's our pathway to victory. It's our youth. That Gen Z that has been disenfranchised. We have a youth movement. If they go to birdforgovernor.com, they click on the flock. That is our youth page. That is our youth movement. That is the youth vote. We are going into minority communities, talking to those women and minority-owned businesses. We're going into mosques, synagogues, Catholic Church, Baptist Church, Pentecostals. We are rallying all of our citizens together to say, don't stand on the sidelines and be marginalized. This is our constitutional republic. Get in the fight and let's progress forward as a nation, as a state in unity.
Many of the same things that our Yakima City council person Matt Brown spoke about an hour ago.
Good man.
An hour and a half ago.
Good man. I know Matt Brown. He's a good man, and he's bringing common sense to Yakima. We're going to bring common sense to Washington State.
All right. Sammy Bird, thanks so much for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Thank
and
you.
We'll have you back.